Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. I'm Dan. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
Doing well. And today we've got a very special, bringing in another bank podcaster.
That's right.
Welcome, Caleb Stevens, to the show.
Bank podcaster. I like it. There's not many of us out there, although it is growing. That's one of the things that I was going to talk about with you guys today was the emergence of podcasting and banking.
There you go.
It's great to be here. I've long respected both of you guys, so appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, it's good.
Thanks, Caleb. Yeah, maybe we're all niche worthy in the bank marketing and banking world and bank marketing world, right? So
yeah.
Well, Caleb, let me welcome you and for our guests that don't know you from your own show, Caleb, I know you serve as the VP of Marketing for SouthState Bank's Capital Markets Division. You guys work with community banks all over 1,000 banks and through a variety of your products and services. So, which really keeps you plugged into the industry. That's a lot of why Dan and I were really excited about having you today. Because Caleb also is the host of the Community Bank podcast. So after you have been sure to subscribe to ours, then jump over to the Community Bank podcast and be sure to subscribe to Caleb's. And Caleb, I do love listening to your show. You've got guests on there with so much value and insight into the industry. It's really a phenomenal podcast. So you're also the author of a book, Collegiate, 7 Ways to Make College Awesome, which was more recent for you than for, I'm not going to speak for Dan, but for me, a whole lot more recent.
Every year it gets further and further away.
There you go.
My co-author and I joked that we need to update it because it's filled with a lot of pop culture references that only people who lived in 2015 would understand. And here we are 10 years later. So
those changed quickly. Yeah. But Caleb, you live in Athens, Georgia with your wife, Grace, and 2 young sons. And I've been fortunate to get to know some of your family as well over the years. So, man, we're really excited to have you with us today, Caleb.
Thank you. Good to be here. Always enjoy talking with friends about banking and marketing. I know that's a passion for both of us, all 3 of us, I guess I should say. And we all kind of sit at the intersection of those 2 things. So it's great to talk with people that can speak both languages.
There you go. Well, and I think that's what we'll deliver today. So
I was going to say, if you didn't immediately stop the podcast after I started bringing another podcaster in, then you're definitely a fan of podcast, bank marketing, and all the stuff. So I think we're going to cover a good gamut of pieces of that today. So,
well, yeah, Dan, let's jump on in.
Let's do it. Caleb, with your kind of purview, right? You have a day job in the bank. You have your own podcast where you're interviewing experts and execs from all over the industry. So you've got a really interesting perspective on what it means to actually do marketing for a bank, but also kind of what everybody else thinks. So we're going to talk today about trends in bank marketing. In general, kind of what you see as roadblocks, pitfalls, and I know you've got your own kind of framework for thinking about marketing too that we'll get into. But let's start with what's your take on the latest trends? What's kind of the new marketing trend that you see having the biggest impact on banks this year?
Sure. Yeah. Well, maybe I should start out by saying we use a term around here called shiny object syndrome.
Oh yeah,
which is a good thing, and we don't want to have shiny object syndrome. So I think before I talk about trends that are new or that are exciting or interesting, I always want to caveat it by saying there's always something new that you could find. There's always a new trend. There's always a new fad. You just go on LinkedIn and follow some marketing people. And I feel like every month the conversation changes. The number of times I hear people say 2021 style marketing is dead, or 2023 style marketing is dead. I'm like, is it? Or are you just peddling a new software that you're selling, or something like that? So I'll just caveat it by saying I think there's a lot of principles of marketing that don't change. So when we do marketing in our world, it's B2B marketing. We always try to start with what we call the 3 M's, which is your message, your methods, and your metrics. And we can unpack that a little bit later. But, if you're just asking my opinion on broad strokes, like things in the marketing world that I've seen take shape, particularly amongst like banks and fintechs, there's a few, and I wouldn't say they're like new as of yesterday, but past 2 or 3 years, I would say what we're doing now is an emergence that I've seen more and more banks adopt, which is a podcast. Same thing for fintechs. And there's a couple ways you can approach it, I think, as a marketer when you have a podcast. One is you can aim to be your buyer's favorite show, which that's kind of the approach that we like to take. Our buyers are community banks. And so we want to be our buyer's favorite show. When I talk to other banks who are trying to start a podcast, I always say, try to be your buyer's favorite show. So if you're like my father's bank in Watkinsville, Georgia, they've got a podcast called Make You Remarkable. And the whole idea is they want to celebrate local businesses and people in those communities that they bank as a way to build not just their brand, but also build relationships digitally with people who listen to the show. Another way you could approach it, and I think they do this a little bit as well, is there's this whole idea called content-based networking. Maybe you've heard that term. I don't know. But the idea is there may be somebody that you've been trying to call on for years that would never respond to a cold call or to an email. But if you ask them, hey, would you like to come on our podcast? It's easy to get a response because it makes them feel good. It's an opportunity to celebrate them. It gives them social media content for their own company or their own bank. And so I would say the emergence of podcasting, one, is a way to add value to your ideal buyer and build a relationship with them. But then two, strategically invite guests on that you might want to get to know in a way that is more friendly, welcoming, inviting, adds value to them beyond just a cold call, which is what every B2B company is trying, whether you're a bank or a fintech or whatever. So one would be podcasting. A couple other things just real quick, I would say would be you see a lot on LinkedIn when it comes to people post all the time, marketing ideas on LinkedIn. One that I'm seeing a lot is this idea of shifting from lead generation to demand generation. And some of it might be semantics, but to me, the basic idea from what I've gathered is 10 years ago, if you were a B2B marketer, what you would do is you would create a lead magnet. So you'd have an ebook or a free video series, and you'd run it on Facebook or you'd run it on LinkedIn or wherever the platform you're advertising it on. You'd get 200 people to download that ebook, and maybe 3 would become clients. And it was this whole idea that we got this top of funnel, we got this middle of funnel. So I give you my email address, I read the ebook, now you send me nurture emails. And maybe a few of those end up becoming clients. And I see a lot of people pushing back on that model to say, is that really sustainable over the long haul? Maybe that gets a few low-hanging fruit, people that would otherwise maybe not buy. But what are you really doing to educate your buyers on the problem that you solve? How are you doing that through a podcast, through communities? How are you creating demand for what you do? And to me, the conversation has really shifted to this whole idea of demand generation. And we like to say around here, marketing creates demand and sales captures demand. 95% of your ideal customers are not in the market to buy and maybe don't even know who you are. So what are you doing from a marketing standpoint to where when they're ready to buy, they think of you and it makes the sales process easier? So I would say that is shifting from just, let's just gen up a bunch of leads and send them to sales, but nobody in sales wants to talk to these leads because it's like, I don't talk to sales 1 hour after I got your ebook. I get that all the time. I download an ebook and then I got a sales guy hitting me up.
Yeah. Well, and I think the world's gotten, the marketing world's gotten so far along that's like when I see an ebook, I'm like, it may look like an interesting ebook, but I'm not even going to sign up anymore because I know it's just phone's going to start ringing immediately and ring for months.
Yeah. And it gets into incentive plans as well. A lot of marketers are incentivized on these sort of low quality leads, which is a whole separate conversation. And then I'll just say the last trend that we'll talk about later is would just be AI. And I think a conversation I hear people having is like, there's this, for a long time, we've talked about how do you optimize for search engine optimization, SEO, SEM. Well, how do you optimize for Chat GPT? How do you optimize for Claude when somebody is searching for a product or service that you offer? What does it look like to optimize in a way that a Chat GPT might recommend your product or service? I actually don't know the answer to that, and that's something we're trying to learn ourselves. So I don't know if y'all have any opinions on that, but those would just be some trends that I'd say I'm paying attention to.
Well, and I think being a user in a lead position, with those channels is probably part of the answer to that question. But some of that is, you've got a great point, Caleb, is probably yet to be revealed to many of us. But a lot of what you're talking about is the utilization, of those tools. And I know we'll get into that a little further as well. And how can those tools be utilized? But what I'm hearing from you is this mindset shift, from fishing for leads, cold calling approach, all of that, to even banks utilizing an attraction model by being, and by being an authority, by being a lot of those things. And Dan, you and I talk so often about brand messaging, all of these things. And it fits with what you're talking about, Caleb, because we're not spending time talking about, fishing for leads on LinkedIn and all of that. Sure, different products and services have different approaches. We all understand that. But content is so valuable because we're all trying to do the best job that we can. So whether it's your podcast or ours, and whether it's, I've heard it called new style networking, is another way to put that around the content and that connectivity that you're talking about, that is attractiveness. And as we're all talking to community bank leadership, for them to think about what attracts people to our bank. And Caleb, you mentioned pain points, and we talk about, pain point resolution a lot. From that's a way for someone to initiate an engagement rather than you're going, so to speak, digitally door to door and knocking on doors. So I love that. You make some great points there. Yeah. What are you seeing? Because Dan and I, our agencies often work with lots of different size banks, but typically smaller banks that seem to be struggling with AI. And you mentioned that, and where to use it, how to use it, what's compliant, what's not, those types of things. So what are you seeing out there a bit?
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording. I think every, particularly community bank, is just trying to get their heads around what are the opportunities with AI. To your point, what are the compliance risks? What are the pitfalls? It's funny, I'll never forget, like in 2008 or 9, asking my father, who's a community bank CEO, he was a chief lending officer at the time, and I said, what's your bank doing with all this social media stuff that's just come out? Facebook and Twitter, what are you all doing there? And he said, well, the board's kind of nervous, the CEO's kind of nervous because regulation-wise, they're just not sure if we can even do this. And that sounds ridiculous today to
right.
and have a conversation that a bank may not be able or wouldn't be allowed to use social media or Facebook. But that was the conversation that was had. And I guess what's interesting to me there is how much of that was sort of a cover for, we don't really want to try new things, we don't really want to explore, and how much of it was, no, there were legitimate concerns because this is a brand new world that we're in and nobody knows the risks, the pitfalls, the perils. And it feels like a similar conversation is happening now with artificial intelligence, or, generative AI. What's in play? What's not in play? What are the risks? To me, the best community banks out there aren't necessarily trying to invent new things, but they're trying to forge strong, sound partnerships with fintechs and vendors in a way that is solving for something specific. So, AI is cool, and you can, there's a lot of different use cases. I think the best banks are starting with, what are we trying to improve upon? How can AI help us from a customer service standpoint? Are there customer service agents that we could use to serve our clients more effectively? From a productivity back office standpoint, the way we manage our workflow, what are the tools available to us from a efficiency standpoint. So I think it goes back to what are we trying to accomplish? And AI is just sort of a means to accelerate whatever we're trying to accomplish and do it more effectively. I mean, here at SouthState in our marketing department for the correspondent division, capital markets division, we're using tools that just make our day-to-day workflow more productive and efficient. It was funny, I was talking with a team member a few hours ago, and we're building a new landing page for an event that we're having in Charleston this fall called the Elevate Banking Forum. And one of our speakers, their bio came in way too long. Threw it in Copilot, chopped it down in half, and boom, we're done. That could have taken, 10 minutes or so just to comb through it and figure out what to cut, what not to cut, a year or two ago. And here we can just throw it into Copilot and it's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now we've saved, 10 minutes of our day, which over time compounds on each other. So, I think every bank is different, but I think the best ones are saying, what are we trying to improve upon? And then how can AI help us do that more effectively, faster? And then, of course, I think the question also becomes what's compliant, what's secure, because that's a big conversation as well.
I've seen a lot of kind of clear uses of Gen AI for the back office stuff, but it's hard, right? It's hard to tell like what's actually being used, what's actually making a difference, right? Are you seeing, I know last year was 2023, 2024 was all about like every tool out there, every fintech, every bank tool added a
those
little
shiny
AI
objects
window.
that Caleb was talking about, right?
Yeah, everybody added a little AI window, right? And it was like, great, Gen AI, this line for whatever it is that you're doing. But it was like, that's not really workflow. That's just like the platform is checking a box saying we did this. You mentioned like banks are just looking for using AI to improve something that they're doing. But like, do you have a couple examples of stuff that banks are actually doing with it that's making different processing, regulatory changes, processing that type of stuff, or marketing use cases?
Yeah. On a street level, I can only really speak to what we're doing from a marketing standpoint, because that's the world that I trade in every day. I don't work in deposit ops or in lending, so I only know what I hear casually from other bankers. I will say our IT, from like a coding standpoint, I think has seen some benefits from it in terms of, you see a lot of people on LinkedIn talk about how much more effective it's helped their coding capacity. So I've asked the same question to banks on my podcast, and I think all of them say we're not sure what the use cases are going to be long term. We're sort of looking to other banks, maybe bigger banks, to sort of take the lead and figure it out, or other fintechs. And so to shoot you straight, I can really only speak to how marketing and how our team is using AI on like a day-to-day level.
Well, and Caleb, you mentioned they're looking to the bigger banks, et cetera, but Dan and I see some of them looking to our agencies, saying, look, you guys are our partners. Here's what we need as a marketing strategy or a deliverable or a tactic. And they're looking to us, and if we're better utilizing AI, then sometimes they want to look to us as an external vendor partner, to you guys figure out the AI thing and make it more efficient, make this happen faster for us as a bank, that type of thing. So I think that's a key one as well. That wasn't a self-promotion point. It was one that's a really sensible strategy for some, because, I've heard, the same thing happen with what you're talking about with social media. And until FFIEC guidelines came along in 2013, banks were just, I don't know. It was like the Wild West. Maybe we're doing it right, maybe we're not. So I like your analogy of that with AI. So some of them seem to feel less risk if they're looking to their partners to, hey, look, here's the pain point. Here's what we're trying to resolve. Be more efficient about, or reach this audience by, or, fill in the blank. And then you guys as an agency, you guys go figure out how to best do that.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me too, this is a side tangent that we don't need to necessarily get into, but even how we're defining artificial intelligence to me is an interesting conversation. I bet you when the calculator was invented, that's a form of artificial intelligence. I used to have to do this on paper in my head, and now I can punch some stuff into a little keyboard and boom, out comes the answer. That's artificial intelligence at its most basic in a lot of ways. And so, even how we're defining it, I think colloquially, we kind of just think of ChatGPT, Anthropic. We think of the chatbots and things like that. But I'm just kind of excited to see all different kinds of technological developments that will serve banks over the long haul that maybe don't fit the label of generative AI, but are nonetheless a form of, artificial intelligence in many ways.
Yeah, I think I said a while ago, it's like it's pretty impressive what the Gen AI tools can do today, but it's like, it's going to get really scary in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I cloned myself the other day. If we're just talking about marketing stuff, and if you knew me, you'd say that's not Caleb. But if you didn't know me, I actually gave a presentation to a group of students at UGA in one of the marketing classes. They thought that was me, and I was like, I didn't say a word of this. That was my clone.
Yeah, and I think today it's like, you gave an example earlier, plugging a bio into ChatGPT and having it shorten it. Like, there's tons of use cases like that can just save you bits of time, and but then there's this whole other level of like loan approvals that are done fully through through AI, and making actually making decisions that the technology is going to get there, but it's not there yet. So it's
loan
like
approval, credit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
credit, the back office. I think you could find a use case in just about every area of banking, no doubt. Customer service, all those things.
Yeah. So I think we were going to talk a little about like compliance and marketing, but I think it's like everybody's trying to figure out what it means, what using Gen AI means for compliance when, but then it's just going to keep changing. So if it takes too long to kind of figure out what Gen AI means for compliance, there's going to be much bigger compliance issues coming soon.
Great point. Yeah, it already passed you by the time you figured it out. If you're moving that slow, that's right.
No doubt.
Can you talk a little about like the compliance issues you're seeing, or is it just like trying to figure out what it means before the tools get too integrated?
Yeah, I would say it feels like a lot of banks are taking a pretty restrictive approach, but with good reason. Again, I think most banks tend to be pretty conservative and cautious, and probably don't want to be the first to jump off the ledge. And so, again, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of banks maybe being a little overboard on compliance, not out of we're trying to stifle innovation. It's just all the stuff's kind of new, and we're just trying to figure things out. And I don't know how much I can speak to this, but I know at our bank we have an AI committee. So like if you get any kind of vendor that you're trying to get approved, and that vendor uses any kind of artificial intelligence, that goes through our AI committee to be looked at, to make sure that there's no risks associated with anything related to AI that they might deem would be a risk. And so, I think that's good. I think that's needed, and it's we're a very large bank, and there's a lot of risks out there. So, I would say on the compliance side, I think that's one development I've seen is a lot of banks creating an AI committee to come together and say what's in bounds, what's out of bounds based on the information we have at the time. And granted, it might be 2008, version of social media, but you've got to start somewhere and get clarity. And then I think with good reason, many banks would rather be safe than sorry on that front.
Yeah, it's a great thought.
You're going to be better off if you start doing something. You're not going to have it figured out. You're not going to be able to just sit down and write a AI compliance policy. But if you don't start meeting, talking about it, you're going to be
and if folks want more kind of a deeper dive on how other banks are thinking about AI, I would actually refer them to our blog that is written by Chris Nichols. He's our director of capital markets, but he works heavily on like our fintech investment side of the bank and writes a weekly blog. And he's got a lot of great articles that we publish on how SouthState has thought about AI, how other banks are thinking about it. So if you want a deeper dive and, somebody that can speak well above the level that I can on all things AI and banking, I would just encourage you to go to southstatecorrespondent.com and click on Banker to Banker, which is our blog, and you can get weekly updates. And I think you'd learn a lot by reading some of Chris's insights.
Great. Well, and for everybody that's either jogging down the road or driving, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. So don't have a wreck trying to write down the URL that Caleb gave you. So no, great. Thanks for sharing that resource. Okay, well, one of the things that we talked about, the three of us, in prep for the show today, it kind of falls under the banner of future-proofing your marketing strategies, and certainly, AI has to do with this. But you were talking about structural approach and perspective for those things, for kind of that future thinking and future proofing of marketing. And you mentioned your 3 M's, and maybe you want to repeat those and elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah. So let me back up half a step and just say what's interesting to me when it comes to banking in particular is banking is both B2C and B2B. Whereas a lot of companies, you're just trading in one area or the other. You're Nike and you sell shoes, or you're McKinsey and you sell consulting projects to companies. Banking is unique in that you're both dealing with companies, decision makers at companies, but you're also dealing with individuals. And so in the world that I deal in, it's mostly B2B. And what's interesting is as I look out at a lot of banks today, a lot of banks just think of marketing in terms of B2C, traditional marketing, billboards, radio ads, your website, social media, all good things, all things that help build your brand and all things you should do. I don't hear many banks talking about how do we align our marketing efforts with what our commercial lenders are focused on to bring in accounts. And so that's sort of the world that I live in every day is B2B marketing. And so when I talk about our framework, I'm thinking about it from a B2B standpoint, although I do think a lot of the principles carry over to B2C as well. I like to joke that Chick-fil-A is trying to get 1 million people to spend $10, and I'm trying to get 10 people to spend $1 million. So the approach is going to look different, but I think the framework is the same. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there that when I'm talking about these 3 M's, I'm trying to get 10 people to spend $1 million. I'm trying to build relationships with community bank CEOs, that sort of thing. And I think banks should be doing that same thing with their marketing for their lenders. But the 3 M's, it's your message, your methods, and your metrics. That's at its most basic. Whether we're doing marketing now or in 10 years, I think that will probably remain our framework, which is our message, our methods, and our metrics. And it's rigid enough that I think it gives us a way to think about marketing in a way that's stable and steady and doesn't change. But it's flexible enough that how that gets done, the tools that you use, the tactics you use can always be up for debate. So it's kind of the saying, marry the mission, date the methods. We're married to serving our clients. We're married to helping community banks thrive. The way that that's going to take shape is going to change over time. So let me just break those 3 down real quick. First is your message. The whole foundation of how we do marketing is based on a quote from Donald Miller, which is, people don't buy the best products or services. They buy the products that are communicated the clearest. So you can have a superior product, but if your competitor is a superior communicator, they will beat you in the marketplace almost every single time because the customer will never know you had a better product because you couldn't communicate it clearly. So we look at everything that we do in marketing through the lens of, is this clear and is this compelling? We run all of our marketing collateral through Donald Miller's Story Brand Framework. It's a 7-part framework that makes sure that you are the guide in the story, not the hero. Your customer's the hero, you're the guide. And too many companies, you go to their website, you look at their marketing collateral, they're beating their chest. It's look how great we are, look how awesome we are. Or even worse, it's my granddad. My granddad started the bank 100 years ago, and you talk all about how great you are or how, you've been around for 100 years, but there's nothing clear and compelling as to how you can make your customers' life better. So everything we do, is it clear and is it compelling? I would highly recommend folks check out Donna Miller's Story Brand Framework. That's sort of the framework that we use for all of that. If that's kind of the foundation of the house, we could do all kinds of crazy, cool tactics and methods and strategies. But if the message isn't there, if it's not resonating in a way that's clear and compelling, none of the tactics are probably going to get us very far. Okay, so that's the first. Second is the methods. So you've got a clear message. Now, how are we going to get that message in front of our ideal buyer? So the question there becomes, who's our ideal buyer? Where do they spend their time? And how can we show up during their day in a way that is clear and compelling and adds value and builds trust with our ideal buyer? So take my dad, for example. My dad's a community bank CEO. He's our ideal buyer. Where does he spend his time? Well, he drives to the gym in the mornings. He drives to work after he goes to the gym. He sits at his desk. He looks at his email. He goes to conferences. He goes to events. Okay, so how can we show up strategically during Neil's day? Well, We could offer live stream events and webinars when he's at his desk. We could put a really crazy creative direct mail package on his desk during his workday. We could show up in our podcast because he's driving to the gym or he's working out or he's driving in his car. We can show up there. He browses on LinkedIn. A lot of bankers are on LinkedIn now. We can show up strategically on LinkedIn. He reads his email. We could strategically, craft email campaigns that he would look forward to hearing from us. So we're trying to think about who's our ideal buyer, where are they spending their time, and then how can we be someone that they look forward to hearing from as they go throughout their day, whether that's our podcast or our direct mail campaigns. It shocks people when I tell them our most effective channel by far is direct mail. It's like not even close, because I like to say in a world of digital, don't neglect the physical. Nobody's doing it. My dad gets called on 30 times a week by people like me, but he doesn't get crazy, creative, interesting, thoughtful direct mail packages hardly ever. It gets his attention.
Yeah, Dan and I talked a couple of episodes about some new information that ABA released earlier this year, and it was about channels and all of those types of things, channels and methods. And we were surprised how high digital marketing ranked right up there with primary digital methods.
I got a box right here. We're about to send out to some banks for an international campaign. You can see all the flags, the flags there. It's going to have internationally themed cookies and a handwritten note and a free booklet we wrote and all kinds of cool things to create value for operations and international managers at banks. So we were talking about AI. I'm like, we're sending boxes, man, and it's working. So we're going to keep doing it. Video cards, all kinds of fun things.
Well, I think too, it's like because of AI, everybody can. It's so easy to send spam emails. It's so easy to spam all this digital stuff.
Yes.
And so I think there is a backtrack to that stuff being more effective because nobody's doing it anymore. And the big spam shops are not sending expensive boxes to lots of banks. It's the ones that matter. And when you get that, hey, somebody's spending a lot of money to send this to me. It must be important.
Yeah, and sometimes to scale, you got to do things that don't scale, if that makes any sense at all. Mm-hmm. Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great, and he talks about mergers and acquisitions and how if you have two mediocre companies that combine, now you got one big mediocre company. If I send 5 spam emails and now with artificial intelligence, I can send 5,000 spam emails, I haven't improved anything. I've just scaled mediocrity. It's what my friend David Salyers calls the bozo explosion. It's just, so yeah. So again, AI, it's great, but be thoughtful about how you use it. So that's the second M is methods. We're always trying to think about who's our ideal buyer. How can we enter into their day in a way that they look forward to hearing from us so that when a sales rep reaches out or when they think about our product or service and a need comes up, we're top of mind and the sales process is much smoother and easier. The third M is metrics. So here we like to distinguish between return on investment versus return on ego. There's a lot of metrics out there that make you feel good, that make you feel like, wow, look at all these, name the metric, likes on our social media post, visits to our website, downloads of our podcast. There's all kinds of metrics and things you can measure, but getting crystal clear on what are the things that actually are moving the needle that need to be measured, because there's a gazillion things that you can measure. So I think that's important, and every bank and company's got to decide through trial and error, what are those key metrics for us? One of them is pipeline, qualified pipeline. Where are we in terms of qualified pipeline that's coming in? And in terms of our podcast, it's not just making sure that we're getting listeners, but are the right listeners listening? Are we sure that community banks are listening? Or is it just a lot of our internal people? Or is it just other vendors? That's great that they listen, but that's a vanity metric if that's where our numbers are coming from. Same thing with our emails. And we write a great blog. Are we sure? Do we have the tools to track to make sure that the right companies are reading? We use a software called Lead Feeder where we can see every bank that comes to our site. We can see what pages they click on, how many minutes they spend on each page, if they're a client or if they're a prospect. It integrates with our Salesforce CRM. So that's a way that we can measure not just general website visits, but are the right people coming to our site? Where are they coming from? Are there marketing campaigns that are referring them to our site? So it's not an exact science, but I think every bank and company, whether you're a fintech marketing to banks or you're a bank marketing to businesses and consumers, what are the right metrics to be measuring, and just make sure that you're not measuring vanity metrics that make you feel good, but don't actually move the needle. So just to recap, I guess your message, your methods, and your metrics, that's kind of how we filter everything through is what are we saying? How are we getting that across? And then what are we measuring to make sure that it's working? That hopefully is flexible enough that whatever shiny object and tool comes our way that we can try next, the framework will hopefully stay the same.
Oh, that's a great point about the utilization of new platforms and the all the bells and whistles and softwares and all of those things that are out there, and running those through that filter, before even bothering with a demo, about something. Is it going to measure the actionable items that move the needle on our end? And that's a great qualifier for those. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just for us, it helps clarify our strategy, because you can always chase a new tool or a new idea, but what we like to just do is ask ourselves, is it clear? Is it compelling? Are we connecting with our ideal buyers in a way that is genuine and they look forward to hearing from us? And then are we measuring if it's working or not? And there's a lot of things that don't work. So we can them, or we try to retool them. At the end of every year, we grade every campaign that we ran on a scale of 1 to 5. What makes it into next year? What should we leave in the past last year? So it's fun. It's the marketing world's always changing, but I think the idea of creating value for people that's not gonna change. At the end of the day, we're here to create value for community banks and serve them well through both our marketing and our sales team and our products ultimately.
I think that's marketing in general, right? If you're creating value, and then what value is kind of changes, right? The example we had earlier of the spam email, the lead magnet kind of e-newsletter kind of thing, which then everybody's doing it. And so then it doesn't really, another, ebook gated by, entering an email isn't creating value anymore, because there's just a lot of them. So we've got to find a new thing. So then it shifts back to the direct mail piece that creates value and gets somebody's attention, and it'll shift again. And so I think, we've had several episodes on our show about what's good marketing, and it's no one trend, because whatever, especially with, technology accelerating, it's not whatever trend that's working this year might not be the same one that's working next year. But it's being able to adapt to it and having that framework, using a framework like yours, that the framework doesn't need to change, but the methods that you put in there, the message, adapts to what's going on in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the product that you market, it's going to look different. The way that we market our loan hedging product is different than the way we market our fixed income products, because the nature of the products are so different. So that's what makes the job fun, is there's always a fresh challenge. But like you said, it's always about creating value, and that does, the way that happens does change over time for sure.
Well, even Caleb, with what Dan brought up a moment ago, and your direct mail example, can you think of any other, say, success stories or case studies or something like that for our listeners might be helpful? That maybe I can try that, or part of it might be a fit. Any of those that come to mind for you?
Yeah, let me give you a story that may help illustrate a lot of what we're talking about, that I saw a bank do one time. And I thought this was a brilliant example of marketing and lending working together in tandem. So there was a bank that I spoke to a couple of years ago, and they said, we were going head to head with another bank for the business of a car dealership in town, a local car dealership. And it was two banks. It was down to us and this other bank, and they were going to move all their credits, all their loans, all their deposits. They're going to move it all over to one of the other bank. And the lender at this one bank sat in the owner's office and listened really carefully. And the owner kept saying over and over, if I move my business to your bank, I just want to make sure that my mom is able to bank with you guys and it's easy for her. She's elderly. She's like 85. She's not technologically advanced. And so I just want to make sure if we move everything over, my mom can bank with you and it's simple and easy. The lender had a brilliant idea. He went to the marketing team and he said, I want to create a card for this owner. And I want to find, let's figure out which branch is closest to this mom's house. Let's write a little card that's got instructions on how to get to the branch. Let's have every teller sign the card. and let's write a note that says, we can't wait to serve your mom. They put it in the mail, sent it to the owner, and that bank won the business of that car dealership. And it was like a $7 million loan. That's a really basic, simple idea, but it was really thoughtful and it won them a huge book of business. So to me, that's a good example of lending, saying, hey, marketing team, here's a high value account that if we could get their business, man, that would really move the needle. And they collaborated together on something that would be meaningful to that client. So it may not look like sending a card in the mail. It could be, let's invite them on our bank's podcast. It could be, is there an event that we can invite them to that would really move the needle and say, wow, this bank is really committed to not just offering me deposit products and loan products, but wow, every month they've got an event on leadership or on growing my small business or on whatever my industry is. And I get so much value from that. So I think that's just one success story that I've seen of, like, I'm trying to use other banks, not just what we do, because banks are our clients, but other banks that are thinking creatively about how they're doing marketing in a way that really does add value to particularly commercial companies. So that would be one example that comes to mind.
The brilliancy of that is actually the simplicity of it. I mean, that wasn't rocket science. It didn't take some new $3,000 a month software platform. It didn't, it wasn't any of those things. It was beauty in the simplicity of listening well and, diving into relationship with the target audience and delivering really what was needed. Great story.
Another story, just I'm thinking off the cuff here. I've heard of a bank that held an event called Future 50. So they asked every commercial lender, I don't know how many they had, maybe, 10 lenders or so. They said, come up with 5 people that you'd love to do business with in the future that aren't doing business with you now. And they rented out a private box at a local MLB stadium in their town. And that was a great example of marketing working to put on the event, hype it up, do the promotion. But it's on the lenders to identify who are those high value accounts that we really need to be intentional about building a relationship with. And, going back to cold calling or emailing or things like that, that's only going to get you so far. Hopefully you have a referral or, a better in with a potential prospect, but inviting them to a Braves game or to a box seat at something like that. Again, just trying to think of ways that marketing and lending can be working together, because oftentimes marketing's off doing billboards, doing radio ads, doing sponsorships, all good things, all B2C things that you should be doing, running retargeting ads off your website, having a great social media presence. I'm not against any of that. I think what I'm just observing is so many banks just think of marketing in terms of B2C, sort of selling to the masses. I'm interested in thinking about how marketing can help lenders come alongside them and let's go after these 25 accounts. That if we could get those 25 accounts, man, that would move the needle. And how can we partner with marketing, to do that?
Yeah, that's great. I work with a small bank that does something similar. They're not, not in a big market like Atlanta, but the inviting people to an event that they actually want to go to, not just like, here's some cookies and crackers in the bank. It's, it's a baseball game. It's, a hockey game, whatever it is that's actually interesting. And they know there's some sales aspect to it, but it's set up more like conversation, a party, come hang out, like not, we're going to sit you down across the desk and, start negotiating with you. So, and then if you've got your marketing teams to support it, marketing can almost be that edge smoother outer, right? If you just leave it to people that are in sales all day, it might feel more salesy. But if you put some branding, put some smoothness to the edges, it can be really successful.
Yeah, and not to make too big of an advertisement for you guys, but a lot of banks don't have the infrastructure in their marketing department to pull a lot of this off. A lot of them are overwhelmed or understaffed and have 1 or 2 people on their team. And so, going back to finding like-minded partners that can help you go further faster, whether it's an agency or some kind of partnership, I think that's always an important piece of a bank's marketing strategy as well.
Yeah, great point. Well, and business methodology today just makes great sense. If you can't hire a 3 or 4 person marketing team, then how can you accomplish some of these things and move ahead? And yeah, so finding the right outsource partners obviously makes a lot of sense in a lot of different capacities. So super. Caleb, man, great high value information and good case study thoughts too there too. So I've actually been jotting some notes. So I appreciate those very much. And we can't let you get out of here because all of our guests have to go through our lightning round. So just to pile the pressure on you, as a fellow podcaster.
Well, I told somebody this the other day. Being a guest on a show versus asking the questions is like a totally different experience. I told a guy, I said, I feel like I'm Conor McGregor going from MMA into boxing. It's like, it's not the same. It's totally different.
Yeah. Or the guy that's calling the game rather than the one that's in it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Different one. Well, so our lightning round questions though really aren't too painful. So we'll start with kind of some softballs. And can you give us a personal best and a business best that come to mind for you?
Oh man, personal best. My two sons turn 3 and 1 next month. So excited to have a little joint birthday for them. Their birthdays are only a couple weeks apart. So we've got a growing family. We're low on sleep, but high on joy. And as far as a business best, I've enjoyed getting to architect our division's marketing strategy. I started out in sales, and then COVID happened, and we couldn't go travel. And it was like, well, how do we keep adding value to our clients when we can't go see them in person? So we started doing live streams, webinars. We rebuilt our website. We started doing direct mail. We started the podcast, LinkedIn advertising. We just kind of ventured into a new world probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But that's been a highlight of my career, is getting to kind of architect a playbook and an approach towards marketing. And, to your point earlier, it's a mix of shiny objects and fancy tech, but it's also some just old school, old fashioned, being thoughtful, being intentional, sending something in the mail that gets their attention. So it's been a great ride so far. Very cool.
So, speaking of, you can call it old school or not, but it's always resourceful too. What's a favorite book that comes to mind for you?
I read a lot, but I don't read a lot of business books, which kind of surprises people. But I think when you work in business and marketing every single day of the week, you kind of like to dive into other things. So I enjoy theology books and all kinds of different books. But yes, the one you're holding there, Remarkable. That's a great book. In fact, we're hosting an event this October in Charleston, South Carolina called the Elevate Banking Forum. And the author of that book, David Salyers, one of our board members, will be our keynote speaker. So would love for folks to check that out. Another book I will say is actually a book that my father recently wrote called Leading Life on Life. It's a very short book, like 80 or 90 pages or so, but it basically gives you like a really simple framework for how to lead people effectively. There's like 3 million leadership books out there, but I think he tried to just distill his leadership philosophy into like 4 easy steps. And so I would recommend Leading Life on Life by Neil Stevens.
Yeah. Dan, we're familiar with that one too. Yeah. So those are great. Yeah.
Go back and listen to Neil's episode from must be a couple years ago now, but
yeah, it was a couple
right when that book
ago.
was coming out, and we talked a lot about it. So
yep, love it. So, Caleb, what's the most impactful piece of advice that you've received?
Oh, there's a lot. A couple pieces of advice. One would be always be building genuine relationships, not in a how can you serve me kind of way, but in a how can you serve others kind of way. And what you find over time is that when you build genuine relationships, that accrues benefits to you over time, but really the joy is in getting to serve others and build relationships with others to serve them. And I got that directly from my father, and it's pretty crazy. I can't tell you how many people I know that would say, I got this job because I met Neil, or Neil introduced me to so-and-so, and now I got this job. Like, he's very giving and generous with his time and how he builds relationships. And it's cool to see him impact a lot of people even outside of banking, because he's always building relationships, but then connecting people together. Like, hey, you ought to meet so-and-so, or you guys remind me of each other, or you'd love to meet so-and-so. He's very generous with his network. And so again, it's not like how can I network and further my career and all that. It's more a posture of how can you serve others through relationships. That's one. And then I think another one, just real quick, would be people grow into the conversations that you create around them. To me, that's some of the best leadership advice I've ever heard, which is, what conversations are you creating around your team? You're either creating conversations that encourage them to give their best, to learn, to try new things, to grow, or you're creating conversations that are discouraging, that wear them out, beat them down. I'd say there's some similar parallels to how you interact with your family members and your kids. So it's always a challenging piece of advice to me, is like, what conversations am I creating around other people? Because the more you create those conversations, the more that they will over time grow into those. And so you want to make sure you're creating conversations that you want them to grow into.
Love those. That's good stuff, man. So what's something that comes to mind for you that you in turn like to advise or pass along to your team?
Yeah. From a marketing standpoint, I think we try to harp on what I shared earlier, the Donald Miller quote: people don't buy the best products or services, they buy the ones that are communicated the clearest. So from just a purely marketing standpoint, I feel like that's the thing we always come back to, is like, this has got to be so clear. Our clients, our prospects get called on 30 times a week by people like us. So this has got to be so clear and compelling and break through the noise. So that's one from just a purely marketing standpoint. I think just in general, beyond that, I think I really use the framework that my father, Neil, uses when it comes to leadership. And I try to share this with others, which is love your team, equip your team, affirm your team, and develop your team. It's those 4 ideas. And that's what's in his book is, loving others, equipping others, affirming others, which is really just another way of saying keep them accountable, and developing others. And so that's something that I try to share and talk about as well.
And those are great. Those are great. Well, Caleb, man, we can't thank you enough. This really has been, it's been informative and valuable, but really insightful. And I think has, hopefully has given our listeners some really great stuff to walk away with. And is there a good way to get in touch with you? And certainly we want to, we'll include in the show notes, links to the Community Bank podcast, and all of that, and to SouthState correspondences, your blog page, and some of those things that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, my email is caleb.stevens@southstatebank.com. And yeah, check us out. SouthStateCorrespondent.com is our website. You can check out our podcast, our blog. We're always trying to create value for community bankers, but anybody else that wants to participate and learn about what we do, happy to share ideas and get in touch. So yeah, appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. Man, we sure do appreciate you, Caleb. This has really been great.
Well, sorry to go almost an hour. Feel like we're on Joe Rogan here. So
we said before we started today, when you're delivering value, the time is irrelevant. So this has been a great episode. We really appreciate you, Caleb.
Likewise.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time. Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.